Ever taping is okay. Recording is in progress. All right. So I'm sorry. Thank you everybody for coming on. I know if you've been on for some of the other sessions, we've been doing this everybody from 9:40. We've had a sports one on for a while. Then we had our theater one, and now we're into music and live entertainment. So that's what we're having here, and we appreciate you guys, students-wise, all coming on. As we've been promoting, we've got two speakers in this program. We have Kevin Lyman, who is here, and Kevin's joining us from LA. I know that we talk about you, Kevin, quite a bit in our classes because a lot of our students have been to the Warped Tours. And every time I bring it up, you know, somebody puts their hand up and has a Warped Tour story. So we talk a lot about things that you've done, and we want to hear, of course, some of the new things you're doing. Amy Cooper is also joining us. Again, a lot of people here know her in Pittsburgh because we work so closely with Stage AE, Director of Marketing for Stage AE, and also doing all of the AEG present shows and all the other venues around town. So you'll be able to tell us about that. So we got two very busy people, but very involved people. So when it came time to select our panel's host for this, we thought these were two good ones because, you know, Kevin comes from just promoter, tour producer, and just so many things, which, you know, we are teaching to get into. And by the way, for the students listening here, Kevin also teaches at USC, entertainment management type classes. So he knows what we go through in our program. And of course, Amy has seen probably every one of our interns come through Stage AE. And we've had, I mean, in the last 10, 11 years, I don't even know how many. And of course, it's been great. They've hired, you know, 3, 4, 5 of our people over there. So we appreciate you guys coming on. I also want to introduce Shea O'Neill. Students know Shea. Shea is our moderator for today. I'm going to pitch in once in a while, but we thought it was important to have one of our students come up and talk about some of the questions that they have, especially as students are, because, you know, this particular thing today is including all age groups. So we could have freshmen to seniors, really to alumni, et cetera. But, you know, so many of the things we talk about, as witnessed by the name of this, emerging trends in our industry, is important because we've got a lot of kids that are going to be graduating soon. And it's so many of the basic things that we figure out, like, you know, how to get that next job. And one of the things that we found, you know, in the last couple of years, as you guys well know, is when we got hit with COVID, I mean, everything started to change. And, you know, now we're trying to get back to a little bit more normalcy and in terms of work, et cetera. But we also know that with that COVID came a lot of changes in the industry that might even open up doors that really weren't open before, so that the seniors, instead of jumping off a bridge like they were going to try to do last year, might look for a job this year, you know? So with that, again, thanks for coming on.
Can I, hey, Ed, can I just have, is everyone supposed to have their cameras off? Because it's kind of weird if they want to turn their cameras on, it'd be nice to see faces sometimes.
And I'm glad you said that, because that was going to be my next statement out of my mouth here was, everybody, if you wouldn't mind putting on some cameras, we'd really appreciate it. We like, especially when you have speakers, they love to look at people's faces, you know, and we've tried, you know, with a lot of these remote teaching courses, you know, a lot of people still don't have their cameras on, but we like when you put them on. So the more people that can put them on, thank you very much. And you can come and go with your camera being on. I know sometimes they don't work, you know, depends on where you're at, but like Kevin said, he likes to look at people in the face when they're talking, I'm sure, and that really helps us.
And it'll help if we ever run across you later on. Sometimes I have a facial thing. Sometimes names are a mess, but if I'll recognize faces, you know.
Right. Oh, there you go. We appreciate that. Okay, Shea, do you want to get started and maybe entertain some backgrounds on both of them before we get started with some more questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Amy, it's really nice to see you. And Kevin, it's really nice to meet you. I've worked with Amy before. As you may know, she's over at Stage AE, and she is the marketing director over there. She also markets the bigger AEG shows now. So anything from Justin Bieber to Journey. And Kevin, as I'm sure we all know, is the mastermind behind Warped Tour. And I know that he has the Kevin Lyman Foundation, which I'm sure he will talk about. And as Ed mentioned, now teaches, and I'm sure we'll hear what he's up to now. So I wanted to, before we get started, say if anybody has any questions as we go along for Amy or Kevin, please feel free to type them in the chat and I'll ask them for you whenever I get a chance. So if we could start by each of you just giving us some background. How did you get started in the industry? What is it that you're doing now?
Want to take it first, Amy, maybe?
Sure. When I got out of college, I was a social worker and I hated it. And I always wanted to do concerts. So I ended up getting a job at a hotel in Columbus, Ohio, that had a partnership with, Kevin, you'll remember, Germain Amphitheater. And so I started booking the accommodations for touring artists. So that's kind of how I got my feel for concerts a little bit. And then from there, I got a job as the director of premium seats for Live Nation at Germain Amphitheater. So did 2 Warped Tours back in 2006 and 2005 and 2006. And long story short, right after that, Live Nation started selling off a bunch of amphitheaters and ours was one of them. So I called Promo West. They had a marketing manager position. I took a pay cut. I really had no real marketing experience. I just oversold myself to Scott, who's my current boss for the last almost 16 years. And from there, I became marketing director. And then in 2010, when we opened Stage AE, I was promoted and transferred here to open the building. And then in 2018, we were sold to AEG, and I was made the regional director of marketing. So that's when I absorbed all of the AEG shows in the market. So since then, you mentioned Justin Bieber and Journey. I did the Rolling Stones. I have Elton John, Tame Impala, Alt J, Tyler, the Creator, Celine Dion that canceled, did Machine Gun Kelly last fall. So in a short amount of time, I've done a lot of shows, especially, since we reopened in 2021. So that's sort of, how I got my start. I knew the general manager of the amphitheater and told her I wanted a job there. I wanted to get into concerts. What could I do? And here I am.
Here you are, boy. I love how sometimes people take that road, and they just go this way, People say, I just wanted to see shows. That's okay, right? I mean, nothing wrong with that. Yeah. Good. Kevin, maybe pick it up how, what was your beginning and how
I
did you get
probably right around like your age right now. I was in college. I went to Cal Poly Pomona and I needed to raise money for a ski team that was underfunded. So I figured out I was near Los Angeles and there was a burgeoning punk scene as well as alternative music and new wave music. And I just decided that I needed to start renting fraternity houses' backyards and putting up a stage and doing concerts in backyards. And that was at Cal Poly. When I graduated, I still really didn't. I had a recreation administration degree. I was running summer camps. So I went over to Hawaii and was running summer camps for a while, and then came back and reconnected with some people who said, you got that experience in college putting up, you were pretty good at it. Are you interested in jumping over to a club in Long Beach? I reconnected with someone named Paul Tollett, who was working for a company called Golden Voice, which is now works with AEG, Golden Voice AEG, who created the Coachella Festival, and I started running production for Golden Voice. It was an independent company, and I started my own production company at that point. And at one point, I was running 320 shows around Los Angeles. 1991, I was asked to be the first stage manager of a tour called Lollapalooza, which was actually a touring festival at that point, not a stationary festival in Chicago. Perry Farrell from Jane's Addiction and that world I was working in asked me to go on the road with that. I immediately came back and started running shows with Golden Voice again, but I was doing a lot of charity shows where we were raising money for AIDS studies, as well as breast cancer education. So I was doing these snowboard lifestyle shows, and I heard in the snow one time someone in the backstage area talking about a new thing called the X Games. And I was doing some stuff where we had skateboarding and music. I paid the Red Hot Chili Peppers $250 to play on top of a skate ramp for an event one time. And I said, you know what? This is time for me to step out and do my own thing. And that became the Warped Tour, which the first year was an absolute failure. But I think a lot of people saw that it was different. It wasn't duplicating anything. You know, a lot of people said, oh, what is you trying to do, the Lollapalooza Junior? No, I tried to create a lifestyle branded tour. And that was really kind of a lifestyle driven tour. You know, I realized right away, I learned how to bridge, because I grew up in a world that was corporate America. And I realized that we could bridge it, since we were spending money in that world and creating something for us. And that became the Vans Warped Tour. During that time, it's funny, at this point, everyone relates to me as the Warped Tour person, but I went on to create many, many lifestyle branded tours. We had the Rockstar Mayhem Festival, which was heavy metal oriented. We did the indoor Rockstar Taste of Chaos tour, because that's when the emo world was coming up, which is it's great that it's never been bigger than ever. And these bands were driving around like Fall Out Boy and My Chemical Romance. And I'd seen them bridging into Warped Tour a little bit. So I created its own festival. And I think Ed, we ended up using, we went to the arenas. We saw a gap in the marketplace. There was an NHL strike coming. The arenas were going to sit empty. And I said, I could package up these bands, and the arenas gave us free rent. I said, once we hit a certain number, we'll pay rent. And it was one of the most successful tours, because we saw a movement, and it was, you know, The Used and My Chemical Romance and these bands, and we sold that out, and we took that around to 23 countries. So lifestyle branded. I did some that we did the Sprite Liquid Mix with Jay-Z, which could have been a very, you know, which was interesting. Some failed, some were good, but we always challenged it. In the meantime, I started a record label called Side One Dummy Records. I became a manager of bands like Less Than Jake and the Ataris during that period. Really always challenging myself. And then in 2000, after 25 years of Warped Tour, I decided that that project for me, I'd done everything I could at that point. Now there's a lot of opportunities coming up now that I might take with it, but right then I wanted to do something different. And University of Southern California, there's some people who are adjuncts over here, said, hey, you should talk to Kevin. He might be a good, but he's probably too busy. So they hit me on the right day. So I find myself in my 4th year as a full-time professor here at USC, teaching 5 classes in the fall, 4 classes right now in branding, marketing, live event production, festival design and management. And, you know, and now just doing some really cool stuff. I was talking before a lot of you got on. I just had a big production meeting. We're doing a show on the Azore Islands in the bottom of a volcano this summer on a concert.
How did that come to be? Like, where did that even come from?
Well, you probably remember a band, Extreme, Nuno Betancourt. So yeah. Nuno is from the Azores. He was really passionate about the environment. And they came to me in 2020, and I was kind of working on it. And we all know around March 13th, 2020, the rug got pulled out of us. The business went to about 92% unemployment, almost within 30 days. So that was put on hold, Ed. So it got resurrected, and I'm putting my old team together. And we've got, you know, Black Eyed Peas, we've got Pitbull, very weird lineup kind of in some ways, but it'll work because it's going to be the first show produced on that island of that size. Wow. And it's got Stone Temple Pilots, Bush, Portugal the Man, and that's what I'm doing. I like to challenge myself, because I think you guys, if you're going into this line of work, the only thing you do is run out of time in your life. And one day I'm going to run out of time, but I'm not going to run out of challenges. A lot of people go, why aren't you just producing a festival in LA? There's a shortage of festival producers in LA. You could work with AEG, you could work with Live Nation. I'm also terminally unemployable. This is my first real job at USC. I had to make a resume. I didn't know how to make a resume in my life. But they're letting me do a lot of creative things at the school here with my students. We did a mental health festival with the students called the 320 Festival with Talinda Bennington, the wife of Chester from Lincoln Park. And I was able to bridge my students into doing that. We had Chris Martin play and Lindsey Sterling play. We ended up pivoting it online. So a lot of cool stuff, you know. And trying to enjoy myself. Sold my tour bus, bought a Sprinter van, and just came back from spring break, which I'm stoked to say I get after all these years. Never got spring break. I was always working, and just spent 8 days traveling around the borderlands of Texas, kind of, one of the most last wild places in North America, talking to people in bars about all drug smuggling and all about what goes on down at the border. So, pretty cool.
Man, I tell you, one of the things I always tell my students is that, we got involved with you in those early Warp Tours. We were very fortunate, and we owned that Icy Light Amphitheater right over in Station Square. And, we had a train that went right through there. It was train tracks, right? And so many of the artists that would come over there, I won't mention the names, through their production, people would say, why in the heck do you guys have an amphitheater right by a train track? And it's just this parking lot. I remember when you came, because I never forget it, it was like, this is what I really wanted. And it was like, wow, somebody really likes our venue, before you had to take it to the much bigger places. Because you were after a different concept back then, like you said.
Yeah, I think at one point when we had the motorcycle jumpers, I thought maybe we could jump the train when it was going through the amphitheater. It would have been pretty cool.
Oh my God. And I had enough trouble with those people up on Mount Washington, you can't imagine, but that's another story for a different day.
But later in life, my philosophy even at school here is that you can do good and do good business. So through my foundation, Unite the United, we are constantly trying to find simple ways to raise money to make the industry better. So what I'm focusing now on is a large scale program for artists who are going on the road. It's going to be one click away from them to be able to support their favorite charities when they go on the road.
Wow.
We're very close. I'm very close to get one agency to sign up their whole roster to this program that I'm starting.
Oh, that would be phenomenal. Okay, great. That's really wild. Well, Shea, you want to start with some of your questions now that we got some background on them? And again, like she said, if anybody has anything you want to put in the chat, she'll ask them when she can, and we'll keep things rolling.
Sure. So I had a question for Amy really quick. Now that you market the big AEG shows, how does that differ from marketing the stage AE shows? What's different between those two kinds of shows?
In a lot of ways, it's night and day. You go from an AEG, or I'm sorry, a stage AE show where the budget is anywhere between $2,500 and $5,000 to the Rolling Stones where you have, a $250,000 budget. So imagine if somebody gives you $250,000 and says, go spend this, but you can't go buy something in a big chunk. You can't go spend it, 50 grand of it at a time. You have to spend $1,200 of it at a time, or 5,000 at a time. And obviously you have a lot more tickets to sell. So, I'm doing a stage AE show because of the genre of, the majority of the bands that we do, a lot of it is TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, some radio, that kind of stuff. You do an arena show and a stadium show, not only do you have that bigger budget, but you can't spend $100,000 on TikTok ads for Justin Bieber. You got to spend billboards, you got to spend TV, those kind of things. So it was a really, everything was thrown in my lap, and not that I couldn't do it, but it was, now I have to find radio reps. Now I had to find outdoor reps. I had to find Bruce Pompiani, who does everybody knows Bruce. If you buy outdoor, that's Lamar. I'm sure you know him. And so, I can knock out a stage AE show in my sleep. I can do a marketing plan in 10 minutes and launch it. You can't do that with an Elton John show at PNC Park. It takes a lot of time, a lot of build up. From little things like marketing, media drops, which is something that we never really do for stage AE shows because we just have this big volume of shows. And media drops are when you personally drop by the TV station, the radio station with something, for Roger Waters, we had custom made pig sugar cookies. And we took them to all the radio stations and they loved it. And then we had custom made sugar cookies for the Rolling Stones with the, the iconic tongue logo, and Pittsburgh Today Live put it in a basket and had it on their news desk for the entire week of the show, leading up to the show. So it might sound corny, but those little things can go a long way when you have a newscaster that will talk about your show every day for free when you haven't had to spend a dime on it. So.
Absolutely. And do you have to spend all of the budget, or are you able to come in under budget?
If your show's not selling, you need to spend every penny, because the worst thing, you get into settlement and they're like, no wonder we didn't sell out. There's $5,000 left. I've had shows where, actually I had one recently and I won't say it, but I had an arena show recently where I had 2 TV spots bumped because of the Olympics. And I think the spots were like on Jimmy Fallon, and then Fallon wasn't running till like 4 a.m. And I was like, I don't want the spots. You can, bump them. And I was told, you're $500 under budget. You've got to spend that $500. So I actually had to go to a TV rep to try to get a spot in, and I made them overcharge me for a Today Show spot so I could spend that $500. To me, that did not result in another ticket sale, but that's what tours want. That's what managers want. And coming from Promo West and coming from such an indie promoter where we're able to successfully sell shows historically without spending a lot of money, I've had to change my mindset. Like, this $250,000 is not my money. If you want me to spend it on keychains and hand them out at the train station, we can do it. So I've really had to flip my way of thinking, like, you got to spend the money, because again, my mindset has always been like, let's not spend money because we don't have to, but it's fun. It's fun to spend somebody else's money and then see the end result at being successful. Justin Bieber's a great example. We announced that tour, I think Valentine's Day of 2020. And then, as we know, the world shut down, and our show, it really struggled or the onset was slow, and COVID hit, and then we moved the show 3 or 4 different times, and now we're sold out. So there was a lot of advertising just to get people to realize that our date changed, and that's always hard. And now it's changed from April 4th to April 2nd. So I'm really hoping everybody knows it's April 2nd and they don't show up at PPG on the 4th.
They come the
Fingers
wrong day.
crossed.
That could be an issue. Hey, that could be an
It
issue.
could be an issue.
There's a lot of confusion right now. I'm not going to be surprised if anybody does that. I've heard all kind of crazy stories.
Yeah.
Kevin, back in the day, Kevin, when you were doing Warp, though, you didn't settle the shows, right? You probably had a tour account that did all that for you, right?
Yeah. It was, usually for most of the years, it was Matt Malice who would come in and settle the shows. They would only bring me in if there was some sort of question mark or one time a promoter lost $500 and I said, I'll be right back. And I went out, played dice in the parking lot, won $500, came in and gave him and says, now we're even. So, I remember doing that up in Portland, Oregon one night. But, we were probably, and other people, but we had a different way, especially the last 10, 15 years of Warped Tour. It was a very easy settlement because we did not take a guarantee. We were just a percentage of gross deal. I believed enough in my brand. I think the guarantee was $25,000.
Yeah, it was a minimal guarantee.
It was a minimal guarantee, and I never changed it. And that was supposed to be production, a production fee, but it was costing me $100,000 to be there that day. But I just said, give me 25 grand, but give me a percentage of the gross.
Right. And
I believed in my brand enough to take a percentage of gross versus a guarantee. And I'm sure you're talking guarantee versus, and that's kind of, so it was a very easy settlement, actually. Right. It was like, there were some deductions for parking and things like that, but it was just a straight, if we hit
calculation, there it is.
Yeah, it was a calculation.
I don't know too many bands that ever, we've had a few like that, but do you see any of that coming back at all?
Well, I think when the pandemic hit, you heard about this new collaborative effort that everyone was going to work together. That lasted for about 10 minutes. And that's lasted for about 10 minutes. And once again, it's gone back to guarantees. And I really believe, and Amy might, is probably going to have a different opinion, but we're in for a very tough summer overall, other than selective things. There's too much, everyone's rushing to get back on the markets. The agents went for it on guarantees. Initial on sales were very strong, so the ticket prices went way up. The ticket prices are very, very high right now. Like you, Ed, you have a great peer group. Every one of you guys out there are buying tickets or looking at going something, and I have it every day. And you're seeing no one has money to buy tickets right now. And we're also looking at the pressure from the economy. I'm thinking we're looking at a year like 2008, 2009 right now.
Wow.
Other than the hottest things, because that we're seeing inflation, we're all understanding it. The gas prices, like we simplify economy in America down to gas prices. It's very strange. I traveled during when Obama was running for president. I went through the country asking people in different states if they could vote for an African-American as president. It was a road trip I did. I wanted to learn myself. And people simplified the economy. When gas prices are up, things are bad. When gas prices are down, things are low. Gas prices are up right now. We're looking at inflation. I'm thinking there's too many shows on the market. I'm starting to see those discounting come into play. Live Nation's Grass Pass, where you can buy it for the whole season. I'm thinking we're going to, you're going to have to be a very hot ticket and a hot package or there's going to be a lot of people, poor Amy's going to be spending, they're going to be coming for more money on advertising. And as much as she spends, people are just not going to have the money to go to shows. So I think it's going to be a tricky year or two. However, if I was young, there's more jobs than ever available in the marketplace. We're finding more jobs for students, especially in the marketing world and in the finance world. And in production world, I mean, they're loading in Coachella right now. And I've got probably, they're just calling, you got any kids that can come out here on the weekend and do something, because we're just a microcosm of society. And we're seeing that the labor market is tight. So when you need so many people to put on these giant festivals, we're seeing it. There's a lot of forces going on right now. And as I like to say, I always like to see how Michael Rapino spins it for his stock price in the next 6 months.
No, that sounds really good. I'm sure you're right. Amy, I know you have a lot of shows that are running. I've looked at your schedule at Stage AE. How are you feeling about that? Because you have them, like I tell these kids all the time, someone like yourself are juggling, I don't know, 20 or 30 shows at one time. And, you're trying to keep everything when we talk about marketing, so maybe you can address some of that and where it's going,
Well, to Kevin's point, I couldn't agree more. I mean, even at Stage AE, we compete with ourselves, and we've put shows up recently that historically either blow out or, the on-sale is so strong that I immediately pull back in. Like, we know we're going to get there, so let's just cool the spin down.
Right.
There's a couple shows in particular where I've been like, what's happening? But then I'm looking at the ticket price. And a $39 ticket sounds great until you add the fees, and now you're at $55. Fees are absolutely insane. We have no control over it, whether it's Ticketmaster or Access. The fees are a lot cheaper at our box office. I think it's like $4 a ticket. But no people, gas is pushing $5 a gallon, at least in our area. Who has the money to spend $55, $60 on a ticket more than maybe once or maybe twice a month, maybe that. I mean, it's really, really hard. I mean, we're at a good position here though. I mean, we can, for an indoor show, if we sell 1,200 tickets, we're good. We don't have the big amphitheater where we're going to have, you can't sell 12,000 seats in an amphitheater or 1,200 seats in an amphitheater and it'll look good.
Right. Yeah.
Try and have any hope of papering and getting drinkers and making money. We can paper certain shows here, get some drinkers in, get the bar, and we're okay. Ironically, these arena tours are really selling, and that's where the high dollar ticket is. Like I mentioned, Bieber is sold out. Roger Waters has the potential to sell out. I mean, we're already making money. That's in July. Elton John, I think we're the third highest gross on the tour right now for his stadium tour, which is fantastic. We were, I think, the third highest gross on the Rolling Stones tour. Of course, that was in October before, gas prices and war and all that stuff is happening. So, I mean, I definitely think it's a real concern. And, obviously in Pittsburgh, we have Stage AE. We've got 2 arenas, which I've been loving doing shows with your son, Taylor. It's been so much fun. We have 3 arenas because I've got Motionless in White out at UPMC Event Center next week or in 2 weeks. And it's, other than a couple hundred holds, which we're going to release, that show sold out. So it used to be arena shows struggled and we were good, but now these arena shows are stronger than ever, which
Maybe they're holding on to the bigger shows, maybe the people are putting their dollars out for that. And then the other ones are going to maybe suffer a little bit. I don't know. That's all I'm thinking maybe.
yeah, I mean, there's got to be something, but I agree. The market, I'm sure other markets are the same, but we are oversaturated with shows. I mean, the Live Nation has done an incredible job with Roxanne. Full disclosure, if you want to see how shows are doing that are seated, just go online and you can see ticket or seating charts and how they're selling. So I did that, and they're struggling over there. So
yeah, Kevin, for her, that benefit, that's a 1,500 seat new theater, renovated theater in a little town called McKees Rocks, right outside of the city, that Live Nation took over a booking agreement on, called the Roxanne. And it doesn't necessarily compete with Stage 8 because you're about 2,300 inside, but in some cases they could try to book maybe the same show,
yeah.
I think the challenges for your students are going to be, right now TikTok's hot for breaking artists. It's great. Everyone, raise your hand if you use TikTok, right? And I see some faces there. Okay, we're going to engage you guys for a second. So you're using TikTok, and I'm like, your task in the world is going to be, how are you going to develop these artists so they're around 10 years from now, 15 years from now? Because right now we're seeing those aging artists that you could depend on, the Bob Dylans, the Styx, all these packages, Journeys, and these kind of things that would go out. A lot of those artists have sold their catalogs in the last couple of years. So it's secured their legacy with their families because the money went to one place, and they're going to be able to do that. But they're starting to, those are the people that were always the promoter could depend on to come fill certain venues every year, every 2 years. A lot of those artists are going to stop touring soon. I think we're already seeing some of them going, okay, you know what? I'll do a select date. I'm not going to do I'm not going to get back on a bus after being off for 2 years or traveling. Right. Yeah. But your task is going to be, how are these artists that blow up overnight going to build a career? Because that's going to be a challenge for you. Really is, because it can't sustain, things blow up and then they disappear, blow up, disappear. How are you guys going to make these people have careers that last 10, 15, 20 years so they grow with you throughout your careers? So you have the ability, because we still have a business that depends on 70 to 80% of all income comes from live touring for a lot of these artists.
Right.
So that's what I challenge my students. That's really what you're going to be facing. We're going to be long gone by then, probably, and it's going to be your task to figure out how you build sustained careers over time.
Great point. Shea, do you want to continue with some questions, maybe something a little different then?
Yeah, I had a question for Kevin. So a lot of the bands that you've worked with over the years, and you've worked with so many, looked up to you because of your prolific music career and everything that you've done. Are you still in contact with any of them? Have they reached out to you for advice at any point or anything like that?
I spend probably about 50% of my time a week, a lot of it, just with people who I came in contact are growing their businesses or looking for advice. I give a lot of free advice. Right? I spend a lot of time with them. I never was like, especially as that went on, I used to tour with my peers. When I started work, they were my friends, Pennywise, No Effects, Bad Religion, all those bands. As the tour grew, I pretty much turned into a mentor or a disciplinarian. So I was kind of a teacher out on the road anyhow. So, does Andy Black come sit in my backyard and watch Super Bowl or football or something? Yeah, once in a while. People like that and then they'll call me and say, or people in the business will say, I'm looking at this job or that job. I do a lot of that. Or am I in the right position? And maybe how do I brush up on my skills, which I had a lot of people immediately when I saw COVID, go get COVID compliance training certificates. I told them, all my crew members and all the people around me, I said, go get that COVID compliance, because I know that there's going to be jobs for you during this time. So, because there was still being a lot of video shoots around LA, there was television work. So we transferred and then a lot of people started working at COVID testing sites, because it's the same organizational skills of putting on a live show was to be able to manage COVID testing sites. I also tell a lot of students and people, go work for a wedding planner. there has never been more weddings in America than there will be over the next 6 months. They're all looking for people, and it's the same skill set as putting on a live show. You've got the rock stars in the band, or the people getting married. You have the audience. You have all the logistics of food and everything. So I'm transferring a lot. So I transfer a lot of skill, help people transfer those skills to other things. And I know some people are like, you know what, Kevin, I'm not going back. I love working for a wedding planner now. I make good money. I get to go home every night. You know, we've got a shortage of, you know, and I'm not saying you want to be a truck driver, a bus driver. We're suffering the same supply chain issues as America is suffering right now. So there's a lot of opportunities if you want to, and sometimes you just got to backdoor your way in by getting those skills.
I think someone said that earlier on another one. I was going to ask you guys, because one thing that I know we all say, and I'm sure you guys are the same thing, when it gets time for them to enter the work field, I tell them, please have an open mind and maybe try to take anything you can get, whether it's in the box office. You know, somebody says, well, I don't want to sell tickets. I go, maybe I didn't want to sell tickets either. And you don't have to the rest of your life. But if it's a door to entry, while you're there, maybe you then meet Amy Cooper and you say, by the way, I'm selling tickets, but I really want to get it. And she goes, oh, I heard we're going to open up another slot. I mean, do you guys feel, I mean, I would think you feel that way, but what's your thoughts on that?
Amy?
I mean, I agree. I'm going to use Shea as an example. Shea was an intern last year, and due to, you know, workflow and COVID and being understaffed, we needed help in guest services. And Shea, are you still working guest services?
I am, yeah.
Shea became a guest, yeah. She became a guest services person, and I don't know if that's your goal in life, is to, you know, restock the bathrooms, but that's an important job because somebody has to do it. But Shea now has her foot in the door at Stage AEM with AEG, and it happened kind of overnight because she was willing to help us out. I think we kind of threw her into the fire during one show. Like, we need help. Go put on we'll pay you $20 an hour or whatever. Put on a shirt and do this, and then hired her as guest services. So, and back to Kevin's point, ironically, one of our runners during COVID did take a bunch of COVID compliance classes. And so when we need a COVID officer on site, we have her. And then she also is doing, she works for Netflix in Pittsburgh now on several different movie and TV sets. And she's like a freelancer. So when she can work for us, she does, but that became sort of her full-time thing. And, you know, another thing is kind of back to the whole COVID thing, is that we've had tours roll in here and they are 11 people short of crew because they're all out with COVID. So you want to talk about, I mean, there's, you know, been back and forth, like, should a tour shut down because the singer has COVID or the drummer? You know, we had Trey Anastasio last summer. We had him in Columbus. His drummer tested positive for COVID. They canceled the show, came here the next night. No, Trey played acoustic there by himself that night. The next night, he flew in a totally different band so that we could have our show. And somebody like that plays in multiple bands, you know, he plays with the Dead, he plays with Fish, you know, he's got a catalog, he's got a Rolodex of 25 people per position, you know, there's 80 guitar players he could call.
That's right.
So that's how we kind of, I know I'm getting off topic, but that's how we.
No, just off topic. I remember that night. He actually brought in John Fishman, his regular drummer, which was really amazing. You know, I wanted to ask a little bit on this for Kevin too, because of the teaching. Kevin, we're finding, at least in our program, and I think it's witnessed by what we see on the screen here, we have right now a majority of our people in entertainment management, you know, because we've got sports, arts, and entertainment. That's the three-way management division of our whole program. But in our entertainment program, we're seeing the majority is girls. For right now, we're going through an area where, and I know, again, some of this you may not remember, but I remember, again, when I came out to Star Lake and you were nice enough to take us around, when we were done discussing with you, you said, hey, do you think your folks want to meet some of my people? And I was, hey, let's go. You ran down the line, and I remember you had a fair amount of girls, women working, tour managing, whatever. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, you know, working in the venues and clubs of Los Angeles during, you know, the 80s, it was majority males, to be honest. It was, and the first time I went on tour, it was all male, basically, in Lollapalooza in 1991. Well, I had made a conscientious decision, in a way. running shows in Los Angeles and New York, all shows have stresses around them. But when bands would roll into town, it was always LA and New York were our biggest shows. And they were like, always like, oh my God, the manager's going to be here. So I had a lot of friends and that were females that had helped me at my club show, in the backyard party shows and stuff. And I said, you know what? It changed the temperament of the production office because they couldn't come in yelling and screaming. They would kind of temper their behavior a little bit. So working there, I made a cut, and I had a lot of women that were working for me during that period when no one else did around. And AEG is very good at that. If you go to the office, they're very strong. Paul's always hired, and Rick Mueller. So we all grew up together. Rick Mueller worked together. Paul, we all worked together. And we recognized, so we started hiring them. And then when I started my touring crew, people, it was just natural for me to bring them on the road. So people like Shea, who ran the catering company, who now runs Tada Catering runs every big show in LA. It's Forum, the Crypto Arena, they're doing Coachella. So we kind of naturally grew until when you saw that, we only had a couple males on the production team, Carrie Nicholson and some stage managers. So it took time. The industry's but we're now at a point where any festival crew, and I'm really proud, that's where your legacy comes in. That's where your legacy, people go, what's your legacy, Kevin? I go, I walk backstage at any festival and people who work for me, because when I started Warped Tour, we were all the misfits. They called us the misfit toys of the business. We were a family that worked together. We worked hard. We never complained. You know that, Ed. We never complained. We didn't expect much. We just rolled in and did our show. But to go to the festivals now, when people worked on Warped Tour, we were looked down at when I started it. Now, if you have Warped Tour still on your resume, you're looked at as like, you don't complain, you're going to work hard, and you're going to have a good attitude. So when you go to the backstage at a majority of a lot of festivals, and the department heads all work for me at one point, and majority of them are female that run the departments. And now they look for people who have worked with us before. And, my students now, my daughter she's now day-to-day manager for Avril Lavigne. She just picked that up, but she still works festival. And she goes, Dad, now in 5 years, every festival is going to be run by USC kids working for someone that worked for you before, because they're coming in with the same attitude.
Right. And that's a good thing,
You guys are and we are, it's people who do the best jobs. There's no, it's now whether, if you're a person of color, LGBTQ, women, anything, we need people that do the best jobs. There's no, it's not having a good personality, it's being able to do good work. So, and
that's really good, because that's helped pave the way for, a lot of people. And that's really, I mean that, because I know that, and I can see that with a lot of our students, that I feel really good about it, because now when you're sending them out to be tour managers, road managers, all the things they want to be, or at least give it a shot, there's a real possibility that they're going to be doing that, where before you might say it, you might, they might get lucky, but there's just many more people. So I guess you're saying what I'm already hoping, because we have a lot of girls in our program.
You remember Lisa Brownlee, she was, Lisa Brownlee, and that goes back to taking whatever job's available. Lisa Brownlee used to sell smart drinks on Lollapalooza. It was like a powdered drink. It was before energy drinks. And then we became friends. And then all of a sudden I brought her on Warped Tour, and she passed out for Spawn Comics. She was working in a merch booth, like passing things out for me for a sponsor. Then I brought her to the production office. And then she became, for the last 15 years of that tour, she was my tour manager. Now she's running the self-help tour and some of these other people that are putting tours out. So that's taking that job. Whatever gets your foot in the door, go in and kick ass. You're going to be recognized. You're going to be recognized in the business.
That's excellent. Shea, while we're continuing on, to not waste too much time, I know you have some more questions, so I'm going to try to let you talk there.
We have a question from Paige for Amy in the chat. How far in advance of the show does the marketing process start?
Well, it starts obviously before the announce. So hopefully in a perfect world, we have a leeway of 3 to 6 months from announce to the show date. Unfortunately, it's not really unfortunate, it's just really the way it is. This is a really fast-paced environment. And once the booker confirms the show with the agent, they're done. They send it to me and it's up to me and ticketing to roll with it. And I might not get that confirmation that the show's happening until 3 o'clock on Friday. And we're announcing it on Monday, which I hate. And I usually have to push back and say, you guys got to give us some time. And if they push back and say, suck it up and it's too bad, then we put a smile on our face and we work all weekend. So that doesn't happen too much, but I just got a confirmation today for a show that's announcing on Tuesday. I can get it done, but I want to make sure I get it done well. So if I have to, I'll probably be working a little extra over the weekend, and it's fine because that's the job. This job is not 9 to 5. So we just have to get it up. So hopefully we have, like I said, 3 to 6 months to promote it. We have done shows in the past where we'll get a confirmation on a Friday, we'll announce on a Monday, and it's 30 days out. Those shows, though, are normally booked really quick as a pop-up, as a one-off. I'll speak about COVID for a second again. A few months ago, artists were having trouble getting into Canada because of various reasons. So we were getting a ton of one-offs because bands needed a place to play, and we're not that far. So they had to cancel their Toronto show, but they could come down to Pittsburgh and play, and they'd hit Buffalo on the way down or whatever. So it's all over the place all the time.
No, that's a great answer, and that does tell us, the kind of time that you'd like to have. Sometimes you don't. Continue, Shea. Another question maybe for the group.
Yeah. So I just wanted to ask, what are some major changes that you both have noticed from when you started the industry to now? Could be COVID related, could be completely unrelated to COVID, just some trends that you've noticed.
For me, I hate to say back in the day, but back in the day, print ads really mattered. Everybody wanted to break with a full page print ad. It didn't matter who the artist was. Now I would fight you over a print ad. I really would. I've done Bob Dylan now like 8 times, and Bob Dylan's show would actually almost make sense for print. And even Bob Dylan doesn't want to spend money on print ads. So we've gone from, let's run spots on the radio station and run a full page ad in the paper and see what happens. And it's just not like that anymore. I mean, I still want to support our local radio because they are so good to us, and we need that on-air element with giveaways. And I need to be able to text Randy Bauman with DVE and say, hey, can you talk about Dark Star Orchestra for a second? And it does come with a price. But instead of spending money on Comcast cable, I'd rather spend money on ads on Hulu, because I'm really curious, who has cable TV? I see one hand.
Cable, yeah.
So very few of you have cable. I'm assuming that you guys are streaming Netflix, Amazon, everybody has Apple TV or Roku or whatever.
Yeah, you see all the heads moving, for sure. You're right on target with that.
Yeah, I mean, like even my parents are in their 70s, and if I was going to target them, if I was doing the Rolling Stones, they're not watching the evening news, going to see a Rolling Stones clip. They're going to see it on YouTube, because they love to watch YouTube. But I mean, every day almost, it feels like the trends are changing, and it's a lot to keep up with, but that's what keeps us fresh and keeps us learning and keeps us growing. Yeah. And agents and managers love it when you come to them with something fresh. I mean, and they too get tired of okay, great, spots on the X, but what else are you doing? So right now I'm actually doing, if you're familiar with where Ross Park Mall is on McKnight Road, there's a huge wall, and I'm going to own that wall. And we're going to have various shows on there. And then I also am doing something with Still City Media, which I'm super excited about, which they now are able to buy media in places like TV screens on gas pumps, TV screens in gyms, TV screens at Topgolf, ride shares, that kind of stuff. So instead of spending money, on other things, I'm now going to allocate, because everybody has to stop at the gas station. Even if you don't have a car, at some point you're going to a gas station to get a loaf of bread, pack of gum, whatever the case may be. With gas prices, I would be really curious to see if ride shares are up, because of gas prices. But the world is open. People are out and about, and on the weekends, people are using ride shares, and now I can get you in your ride share. So everything's changing, and I'm sure in 5 years it'll be even different. Maybe even next year. Who knows? Who knows?
Kevin, some things, maybe you've seen a lot of changes, I'm sure, but maybe you can name a few things.
Well, I mean, I think, in the sense of festivals, we've gone to, they're artist driven or successful. I always tell, because that artist has people's phone numbers in their phone that they can call their friends that are artists to get them engaged, versus calling an agent who's just going to divert you to the festival department, which all of a sudden they want X amount of dollars. Right. So that artist driven festival, I think, will continue to grow. One thing I think AEG has done a good job, and if you weren't here, Amy, I'd say the same thing, is they've identified, especially in there with Melissa Orman, doing these unique 1 day or 2 day festivals. I always say, as we are a festival culture in America. I think that really started, you could talk about the anomalies of Woodstock and those kind of things, but 1991 it started. So people like to go to those festivals, but they can't go to a 3 day festival. They don't have the energy that it takes to go to a 3 day festival. So they've done a lot of these unique 1 day festivals. I'm right next to my house. It's funny, I can hear them from my backyard, over at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, where they take like a genre of music that might appeal to an older audience and condense it into a 1 day festival. And people, I always say, I did it with that punk show I did in LA when I put up It's Not Dead Fest, I called it. And I said, you know what? And everyone was, I said, I needed it for my soul at that point. I had a rough year in 2017. My wife says, can't you just do a barbecue? Why do you have to risk our house every time for your soul? And I put up all the old punk bands on a Saturday, and 30,000 people came out to see NoFX, Bad Religion, Pennywise, Descendants. And I had convinced all the bands, and we had a wheel on stage to decide who the headliner was. So I've been able to challenge it, and so I think the 1 day festivals are going to be a really cool trend. And you build a site, you leave it there. If you can leave it over a few weekends, you can amortize those costs for production. So in the festival market, I see that. I think we're going to see more and more artists who are going to control their careers. They're realizing that moving to a record label has to be the right time, that bringing people in that can manage a career, because you're placing it into the streaming world. Streaming world's here to stay. So I always like to say that the microchip that got injected into us, that they say, it's only a joke, during the COVID, that pretty soon we will just think about a song and it'll be streamed to our head. It will still be streaming. So the labels have adjusted to the streaming model. And I think the artists are going to start controlling their own careers. We have to figure out how they can put more money in their pocket. That there's not so many gatekeepers in between the creation of music and the delivery to the fan. And I think people are figuring that out.
Do you think that the record business will have any more of a comeback, or does it stay where it's at right now with vinyl? I get asked that a lot by students,
Vinyl is still a very small percentage of the music industry. We have a limited capacity to make vinyl. I was actually on a phone today with someone who's buying a vinyl company tomorrow. They're taking over this morning on my drive in. But we do have, it's still a very, very small part. I think it's very relevant. But with your generations, you're going to be moving. You're much more mobile as a society. You're going to be moving more often in your lives. It's if you go through it, you're moving more often. You're taking different jobs, which makes you more mobile. Once you get a crate of vinyl, and we use those old milk crates, you realize how heavy vinyl is to move around. So I think everyone, I always say, you guys are going to want one great crate of vinyl, because carrying 2 upstairs and 3 is brutal. You're not going to be living in a house for 30 years where you want a wall of vinyl. You're going to have some nice stuff and move around. So I think vinyl helps. It's a niche. It's still a very small niche. The major labels have become accounting companies, basically. They're looking for that pop hit. I call them now, in the stock market, they used to look for that high flying stock that would subsidize all the losses. Now they're just looking at it as mutual funds. So if they can grab a TikTok off a song off of TikTok, they can grab a single here. They're just building their mutual funds that feed their machines. So they're basically giant accounting companies at this point. And if something doesn't work, they move on to the next thing. So I think that artist development and that long-term artist development is going to come from really strong managers who kind of start figuring out how to monetize. And we've learned how to monetize things in different ways. Now, I thought streaming was going to be there, but they screwed it up because they started paying artists guarantees to stream. I think at the beginning of streaming, I was involved with a company called Veeps. I was an early investor in that eventually sold to Live Nation. But when artists were part of the process of creating their own streams and monetizing them, it was great. Everyone was on board. It was that door deal. We basically had a door deal. If the stream was successful, they made good money. But then the agents were trying to figure out how to get their piece. So they scraped their way in, and then people started paying guarantees for streaming. And once you start paying an artist guarantee to stream a show, there was not the necessity to work hard on the show. So streaming will settle back into a marketing tool. I think it's going to be there, but which companies will survive will be very interesting over time. Things like Cameo that were dismissed as now artists have embraced them and realized that there's other ways to do it. So I think, and then a lot of managers have been fired over the last 6 months because the ones who sat on the sidelines during COVID, their artists are asking questions. Why didn't you get involved? Why didn't you get off your ass and let's do all these things? So you've seen a big shift in management right now. So
that's interesting. I was just going
to explore every option, including touring, but we've got to get it to where we're not 60 to 70% dependent on income from touring. You have to balance your portfolio as a manager or artist so you can be bringing little revenue streams. So if we get hit by something like a pandemic again, it doesn't blow up your whole ecosystem.
No, that's a great point. And I was just going to ask you, does this give the opportunity for some young people with new and energetic minds to become new managers? Because I know that, maybe it's just my age, but I know a lot of managers that are my age and older, and you know what, it's time for them to move aside. Let some of these young people have some ideas. I'm wondering if it's going to be that way. Do you think?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm seeing it already. We have some artists who have moving out of USC, Sweetie, and some of these people, 24 Golden, they were students here at the school, but they're being now worked by, so the students are now managing them.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking,
So, I believe you look in your own backyards, look to your right and your left on the screen. Those are your peers forever. And the sooner we get out of your way in many ways, I always say, I've been trying to be nice to the younger generations forever. And maybe they'll let me be the Walmart greeter of the music industry for a few years, but most of the music industry needs to get out of your way and let you do what you do best. Blending technology, new ideas, and challenging the old way of doing business. There is no reason you can't change the business and that's why I don't have rubrics in my class. Students want rubrics. They want rubrics. And I said, if I followed a rubric in life, I wouldn't have become Kevin Lyman. My job is to teach you how to break a rubric and challenge everything that has ever been done. And it's very hard for students to do that because you have been taught to test your whole life. Yeah. But I sometimes don't think you've been learned how to think. Thinking and learning are two different things. Because and so that's what I try to do with what I'm doing now. Is teaching people to think on how they're going to want to see the world and the business. And the sooner a lot of us get out of your way, the better we're going to be.
And I'm sure you're similar. And again, I don't mean to be taking this up, but you're a teacher, so I think we can relate. I often tell these students, you can be that agent or you can be that manager. I think what happens, and I think myself, I was probably the same way. I'm always thinking it's got to be somebody else. Like it couldn't be me. I'm just like the nobody, So like, I think it's important that young people try to feel a little bit more confident in themselves and just try to say, all right, then let me be that person, right? I mean, why not?
Yeah, and it's I was the person that loaded people's vans, you guys. I swept the floors in clubs. I swept, we started there and people said, even like, oh, yeah, I was that person. I could have still been doing that and probably been fine, but just keep challenging yourselves. It's okay to fail. Failure is growth. But do your work on time, right, Amy? If you ask one of these people to do something on time, they better do it on time, or you're going to do it yourself and save the money on that.
Absolutely. And I will say this because that's something I definitely pride myself on. I can honestly say that my boss, Scott Steinecker, has never in 16 years asked me for something more than once, because he's my top priority. I will drop everything. I will work overtime. I will get that off my plate, have him off my back. And it's so important. But I also have to treat that with every show. I have to treat Zoso as important as the Rolling Stones. Not always easy to do, but everything is important. But yeah, you should never have to be told twice to do something or asked to do something. If you can't do it, that's okay. You gotta figure it out. You have to be upfront about it. But yeah, just do it.
Really good. Hey, Shea, do you think maybe we should answer some of these chat questions also? Because I know the time's going to be of the essence here, and they probably have some good questions. I see that we had some talk back and forth, or just whatever you want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking at a question from Samantha to Kevin. She says, big fan of your podcast. I've learned a lot from everything you talk about on there. I'm a student at Carnegie Mellon in the Entertainment Industry Management Master's program, and we're almost entirely women this year as well. When and why do you think this shift happened in the industry?
Well, I think there's enough peers out there for you to see that it's possible. You know, when you just looked at something and it was all male dominated, I think that was intimidating in some ways. But there's so many strong women in the business now that will be your mentors, that want to mentor you. Sometimes they are the hardest on you, though, because they want to make sure women are coming into the business for all the right reasons. And I hate to say it, it should be an equal playing field in life, but we all know that sometimes it's not. So a lot of times when women were coming into my world, I would hire them and say, come in. But the women who worked for me wanted to make sure that they broke down a lot of walls. You're right there with them. And those walls are broken down right now. So I would say my class, I have a class right now coming up, and it's the same way. I think this class has 24 people in it, and 20 of them are women in the class. I have a class of 54 in my marketing and branding class, the biggest class I have, and it's 38 women. So you guys will own the business very shortly. It's cool.
Sounds like they're taking over.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Shea, keep it up, man. I got another question.
Yeah, I have a question from Mandy to Amy. Do you notice that certain music genres are easier or more difficult to market? For example, is it more difficult to market a rock or alternative band rather than an artist like Justin Bieber, or vice versa?
That's a really good question. Justin Bieber's easy. He's a household name. Not hard to let everybody know who he is. And there's a lot of great ways to reach his fans. TikTok, radio, Instagram, even grassroots to a certain degree. But you take a band like, I'll take Less Than Jake. Less Than Jake's, punk pop band. Those fans, they're not getting played on the radio, but people that listen to the radio are fans of them. So they're not quite that household name as, let's say, a Bieber. So you have to get a little bit more creative. You have to find out where that fan base is and reach them directly. And, a lot of promoters don't have a street team. They don't have internships. They don't do grassroots marketing. And we do so much of that. And it's extremely effective. So we're definitely old school when it comes to that, but it's still really important to have flyers up in the bars and tickets at trivia night and those things. It really does count. And what I love is when I'm walking around town or somebody will tell me that they saw our flyer somewhere or they heard about our show, not on the radio, not on TV, but because they went to a bar or a beer distributor, or they saw our concert calendars on a case of beer. Other promoters aren't doing that. And there's something else that I like to try to offer to bands. I'll use Less Than Jake for an example. Is I have a relationship with AT&T Sportsnet, and they're the network that carry the Penguins and Pirates games, and they only work with me because we've been doing this forever. And I just asked them, I was like, if you can just work with me and not our competitors, then I'll go to bat for you. And it's worked really well. So what we do is we work together with agents and managers to get gratis usage of songs that are then used during TV broadcasts during those games, and it's all free. So a band like Less Than Jake, not a household name, I don't have a big budget. Now we have this huge platform for free to get them in front of tens of thousands of people to not only promote the show, but promote the band. So,
Yeah, I've seen that. I think that's really good. I always thought that was good. I've noticed that a lot of Pirate games, you'll be watching and you'll hear, the announcers reading over a List and Jake song, and you're thinking, man, he seems really hip when he's talking like about his baseball game, because there's this really rock and roll band in the background. And I know it's you did it. Shea, what else you got there? Another student one?
Yeah, we have a question from Paige for Kevin. She says, I know you mentioned working for a wedding planner. Is there anything else that we could do post-graduation that would help us gain experience that we could use in the music industry?
Well, I would say that's something you could probably work at right, if you were in school right now. I mean, the wedding season is going to it's already started. I've been to a Monday wedding. I've been to a Thursday wedding just on location. They can't get it in the last month. Anything that's organizing, it's getting the same, working for a city planning program or, an events programs, finding your way into these street festivals that they're putting on. Some of the cities have these budgets. I always say, if you want to learn, if you're faith-based and religious, learn how to run the sound system at the church, be there and help with the music and the band. It's the same skill set that you start transferring into a different world. I had a stage manager that he came to me and he says, I set up the church band every day. And, and every weekend I went in the morning and set it all up. I go, that's the same skill. I needed him. I brought him out as assistant stage manager. He's a nice guy. He's now working out on the the Billie Eilish crew. The Warp crew is now the Billie Eilish crew.
Is that right?
Yeah. Brian Marquis, the road manager. He worked for me. So they all look out for each other and bring people, but he's now he's the stage manager out on that tour. So, it's one of those things where, it's the same skill sets. You're developing the same skill sets. It's being organized. I always recommend learning Excel, and then if you could develop a little bit, and I'm sure you enjoy it, is when they come in and they say they can do some basic graphics for you. If you need a flyer designed, I got to say, my wife was a graphic designer for Disney and Warner Brothers, but my daughter took a skill set of just learning basic. My wife goes, she's not that good. I go, but she gets it done and she knows how to work it and she can do basic flyers. And now she's designing logos for companies and things on the side of her management thing. But having that skill set, because if you need something quick and you could lay it out for him, you're like, that's golden right now.
It is true. That's really true, right? Shea, keep firing them away.
All right, we have a question from Joe for Kevin. Any chance we will see the return of Warped Tour?
Probably not in the way that it was. To be honest, the economics of Warped Tour are very, there'd be a million Warped Tours if people could figure out the economic model of Warped Tour. It worked for me. To be honest, I had to go raise almost $4 million in sponsorship each year for that tour that we pumped back into the tour. It wasn't put in my pocket. A lot of people would have put that money in their pocket. I put it back into the tour. I made a nice living. I always say it's okay to make a nice living in a music scene, but you don't take advantage of a scene. That's why I was allowed to be around punk rock. And that's why I can do my golf tournament this weekend. No Effects was there. Avenged Sevenfold was there. Bad Religion, because we were part of a community. And the economics, it would have, going out on the road this summer, if let's say you started putting it together with what everything's costing, just the basic skills. And I'm glad they're making it, but a bus driver prior to the pandemic was making $260 a day. That's what they made a day of driving a tour bus. Their going rate now is $400 a day.
Wow. Okay.
I had 20 tour buses that were just production on that tour. Fuel prices, if you looked at it right now, we had 19 semi trucks and those 20 tour buses. I'm just, in my mind, I'm starting, I throw those calculators into my brain, because we would have set our ticket price, which was always the lowest ticket price.
Right.
I think I don't know if you're ever going to see a large scale festival tour again. Now, Self-Help's going out with like 8 bands, but there's not a lot of artist development going on there. They're already established bands and they're only doing 19 shows. We were doing 38 to 40 cities with that tour. We would do people would say, we would do 25 shows in a row. on that tour. You know, we would come in, we would do 25 in a row, and everyone goes, oh, you have, and I go, that's just what we had to do to make the economics work for not only us, but for that band in the van. They couldn't afford to take a day off. We couldn't afford days off. We had to go out and work every day. And that tour wasn't for everyone, and that was okay. But we were, you know, I just don't know. But you know what? There's some stuff coming up. It's a lot of opportunities coming at me. I weed through them. I wasn't thinking of anything, but there's some things. And we did those great one-off shows in Atlantic City at the end. We sold that half-mile beach out. We did 2 days at Shoreline Amphitheater. Never say never, right? I guess in life, you know. But at 60 years old, so I'll be 61 next week. I don't know. Ed knows how hard I worked out there. I never sat in an office. Physically, that tour was starting to take a toll on me, you know.
I'll tell you, there's so much history in there. You know, Kevin, I talk a lot about it. I told him I can remember when we started it, and it got busier and busier. In that amphitheater, when I was finally the GM, my office was in a trailer at the one end, and my box office was at the other end. I couldn't even walk through my own amphitheater. I had to go out on Carson Street because you had a bus here and a Sum 41 there, and there was a school bus. I said, you know, we couldn't get another person in there. And then finally we had to take it to the big place. But man, those were some great days.
Yeah, they were great. You know, it was a great time. But like people go, oh, we need another Warped Tour. No, we need something you create for your lifestyle and your group of peers, run by you guys to do it. You're peer, you're going to run the next things, you know. So yeah, you know, I miss it a little bit, Ed, to be honest. I miss it, but you know, it was a physical tour. There was no, I never sat in an office. I was out in the field every day. I never took a golf cart. I rode my bike everywhere. If I needed to get to that box office, it was a great point of life, you know, but now I've got to challenge myself to do some of these other things I'm doing. And,
that's a great
like
point.
this summer, I'm going to put a stage in a volcano and do a stream, and we're going to have a lot of environmental groups, and we're going to try to do this as eco-friendly as possible and try to make a show. And then I could say I did a show in a volcano. But, you know,
your resume is still growing. Okay.
Yeah, it's still growing.
Hey, a couple more questions, and we're going to let these folks go back to work so they don't get fired. All right, go ahead.
Okay, we have one from Amy, one for Amy from Joe, sorry. What is the most effective media spend?
Ooh, that put me on the spot.
How about that?
One you can track, which is a little difficult, you know, with social media, you know, Google Ads, display ads, that kind of stuff. You know, you can find out the number of impressions, so you'll know if that's working or not. Does radio work? Do people hear a spot on the station and be like, oh, Bieber's coming to town, I'm gonna go buy a ticket? You know, hard to track. The same with TV, but you kind of have to do it for multiple reasons. I don't know if you saw a Journey spot on Good Morning America, if that went and made you buy a ticket. You know, with TV, back to that for just a second, you know, people either pause, mute, or skip through. If they DVR, they're definitely fast forwarding through commercials. So it's really hard to judge. I always get excited though when somebody's like, oh, I saw your TV spot, or I heard the ad. I am a fan of digital or outdoor advertising, OOH advertising, because there's more people on the roads now, especially when you can really pigeon in on where the traffic is. Ed, you know that the digital board out on the Parkway coming from the airport, like everybody at some point goes towards Robinson, whether you're going shopping, you're going to the airport, but you're coming back. So I always buy that one when I have money, because I do feel like there's some impact just based on the traffic patterns.
Right. That's a really good point.
But overall, I mean, it's hard. There's no clear cut answer to radio. You're going to sell a show out with radio, because I have sold out hundreds of shows with zero radio involvement. And I'm not downplaying radio in any way, shape, or form. It just really depends on the artist and, you know, and the demo of the show.
Well, and I think a lot of it, you've mentioned this quite a bit. And again, we talk about this a lot in class because I'll sometimes say, who listens to the radio? And I'll see no hands going up. And so your whole mental process as a marketer, and I know we talked about this some years ago when you saw your buys on radio stations were going down because you were having to put it in all these other areas because terrestrial radio was not like what we might have known it to be, where we were listening, morning drive and after drive and all those kinds of things. You have to find alternative ways to do it. And in some cases, maybe on smaller shows, you don't have to even spend as much money because they're really networked into your websites and the band's, sites, et cetera. But it's different, I guess, is what we're trying to say.
Yeah. And, we have to really rely on artist relationships on a bigger scale too. Like Roger Waters, we have a whole thing with Sirius XM for the entire tour. And then it's split between each show. So part of that budget's put towards me, but our digital team will buy all those spots. So actually the other day on Sirius, I heard our Roger Waters spot. Now it was for the tour. It wasn't for our show specifically, but I don't have the money to buy for that.
No, but it gives exposure to your act, and then people start to say, oh, I saw a flyer for Pittsburgh. No, it's great. Shea, maybe one or two more questions. Okay.
All right. We have a question from Paige for both Kevin and Amy. Favorite show they've done or favorite memory in the industry?
Kevin, go first.
I always say, this is an easy way. I always say the next one. I've been blessed to be able to do so many awesome shows, but a lot of them go down to the benefit shows we're able to do and pull together in short time. We have a lot of, I'm sure you've heard of the wildfires in California, and there was a fire burned a lot of homes up in Ventura and Ojai that I have a lot of friends living. It's north of Los Angeles. And a good friend of mine up there, he does a thing called the Surf Rodeo. They came to me and said, hey, can you pull this together? And in a week and a half, we all pulled together. It was a very interesting show. We had Olivia Newton-John. We had the Red Hot, the Cherry Poppin' Daddies. We had Kobe Calais. The whole community pulled together. Chef Andreas, who's over working with the Ukrainians right now, with people that are being forced out of their own country. He jumped in and organized about 60 wineries and restaurants, and we actually pulled this together. So whenever I can do a chance to pull what we can do, that's the coolest thing. I called my staging companies, my life. Everyone steps up, Those are the shows that I've been lucky enough to do, and it shows the power of music and the ability. If we take the roadblocks away and we're allowed to do what we do best, we can do a lot of amazing things. It's those days off on Warped Tour, because I created those days off where we would give back to a community. That started with Hurricane Katrina, and every day on tour, every year on tour, we took one day of those few days off, and we didn't have many days off in a whole summer, where we gave back to the community. So we worked on flood relief in Nashville, Sandy hurricane relief. We did invasive species of seaweed out of Monterey Bay. But when you can pull our community together, they can do a lot in a short time. And then I will say that when I got emotional, and you learn to compartmentalize your emotions in this business, because there's so many of them, especially when you're in the heat of doing shows. When they opened our exhibit at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I had a memorial wall for all the people I worked with who had passed away that had worked on that tour. Wow. 25 years and even 40 years in the business came pouring out in the middle. It was like the only time I just let it all go.
Can imagine.
We learned that in the middle of a show, you have to deal with craziness. You're dealing with things. And, I know we got to go, but I had a crew member, Brian Marquis, who was hit by lightning when we were doing a show. And I had 15,000 people I was getting to safety. My one crew guy was hit by lightning. I had to deal with that, but also get these people safe. And I always like to say it all worked out because now he is the tour manager of Billie Eilish, and he was the first employee. So
that's a good ending.
It can work out, but you learn that you have to pull so much together, and it can come at you so fast. You learn to make decisions, make them right or wrong, but live by them. Don't overthink.
Great point. Amy, want to finish us up with your favorite?
I'll just show a really quick story about how you can combine a fan interaction with an artist and how much it actually impacts their life and makes a difference. Because we actually have I mean, we're selling concert tickets, we're not doing anything great, but we can make it great. And you won't know who Peter Frampton is, but I want everybody to Google him. He was a huge guitar player, huge in the 70s. Did a show with him in Columbus years ago, and got an email from a man who said his best friend had Lou Gehrig's disease and had grown up in Frampton, and he was dying, and his lifelong wish was to meet Peter Frampton. And these two gentlemen were doctors, and they had a practice together. And the gentleman that had the disease, his name was Jeff. I'll never forget him. And now I'm going to cry. So I emailed, and let me preface, in this industry, you get these requests all the time. Sometimes you're not really sure if they're being sincere or if they're being truthful. They just want to meet the artist. And I took this as he was being honest. So I emailed Vector Management, Peter's management team, told them the situation, and they were like, yeah, let's make it happen. So we did. And I went back and talked to Peter before the show, prepped him on Jeff and the situation. And after the show, took him back to meet him, and he was in a wheelchair. It was like he was frozen from the neck down. It was so sad. And his wife kept saying, he understands where he is. He's there. It's in there. He just can't get it out. And I don't want to cry, but Peter Frampton got on his knees, so he was eye level, and held his hand and said, Jeff, I heard you were my #1 fan, and I got really nervous, and I screwed up a solo. And I hope I can make it up to you. Starts playing the guitar. Gave him all this stuff, pictures, pics, drumsticks. It was amazing. I got to be a part of it, and I just stepped away and watched it happen. And it was amazing. And I got a really nice note the next week that it was the greatest night of Jeff's life, and they had a great time. And then 6 months later, I got a phone call that he had passed away. Yeah. So it's really impactful to be able to, merge those experiences, because all I did was the ask. But what a jerk I would have been to been like, I'm not dealing with this. That was management's decision, not mine. I was just the caveat between the two. So anytime I get a request, I at least ask it. And a lot of times it's a no, but sometimes it's a yes. And that particular situation, that was a really important yes. It
means so much to these people, and you think you just took a phone call and that, no, you're exactly right. That's fabulous.
Yeah, so
really great story.
I love Peter Frampton because of that. He was amazing.
He's great, man. Amazing. Yeah. Well, listen, we're going to let you guys go. Thank you so much. I want to thank everybody for coming on. I want to definitely thank Amy. I appreciate it. We know how great you've been to our students, seriously, over at Stage AE, and we've got a great relationship. Kevin, you've been fabulous, not only what you've done for our industry, seriously, but these kids really watch you. They talk to you, and you've been giving back too. Every time I've asked you to come on, when we've been a Pole Star, we don't take that lightly, because, it doesn't happen a lot. And I'm so glad that you're teaching now, because, you're giving back the knowledge to those students. And just don't be grabbing any students from Pittsburgh right now. We're going to come to Point Park. They don't need to be coming to USC. You got enough out there.
I got a lot of them. Well, great to see everyone. Thank you for turning on your cameras. Great to see you. Amy,
all
take
right, man.
care. Best of luck.
Kevin.
Thanks, everybody.